Would you like to learn from the founder of the brand called You, which gets over 150,000 views worldwide per day? Interviewed more than 2,500 people, including yours truly twice, and is also the author of his 9th book that's just come out in the past few weeks. In addition, my next guest on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast has been a businessman, an entrepreneur, the founder of the Guardian pharmacy chain in India, unbelievably successful in everything he's touched. He is absolutely the epitome of knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Come and join me with my next guest, Ashutosh Garg. Let's go.
Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence, and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Thank you, Sienna, for your lovely duck. Folks, as you know, I'm very, very pleased to have Ashutosh Garg here with us today, who's just published his 9th book. We're going to get into that. Welcome, Ashutosh.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to meet you again.
You have been extraordinary throughout your career in both business and then as an entrepreneur in your own right, as we've explained to people in the introduction. And then you've dedicated this current period of your life to the brand called You. Would you like to explain what catalyzed that, Ashutosh, and fundamentally what that's all about?
So thank you, Gary, for asking me the question and for inviting me. You know, the brand called You was written about 6 years ago as a book. This book was on personal branding. Today, the whole world is talking about personal branding, and there are personal branding gurus all over the world. So, I wrote my book, and there's an interesting story that I would love to share with your viewers and listeners. When I released my first book, it was called The Buck Stops Here. It was a very high profile, a very, very senior person who I knew well came to release the book. There were hundreds of press people and so on. And then I went and asked one of a very senior journalist who I had known for 15, 20 years. I said, will you give me a good write-up tomorrow? And he said, who's Ashutosh Garg? So I said, what do you mean, who's Ashutosh Garg? I said, I've known me for 15 years. So he says, I've known Ashutosh Garg, India Tobacco. I've known Ashutosh Garg, so-and-so aerospace company. I've known Ashutosh Garg, Guardian pharmacy. But who's Ashutosh Garg? And that's when I realized that it's so important for each one of us to invest in our own name. And that's how the book came to be. Then, as I was starting to talk a little bit about the book across different places, people started to say, why don't you start talk to people and start saying, there are so many stories and you've written so many books. We always heard one simple thing, everyone has one book inside them. And that one book inside them, is something which a lot of people are able to write down. But I said a lot of people are not able to write down. So let me start conversations. This is also coupled with another hypothesis that I had, that when I was 22 years old in 99, I was always looking for books of leaders and very few books were available. Today, thousands of books are available, but the young people don't read. So I said, let me start conversations. And this seems to have struck a chord. We're now probably the biggest in the world with 2,500 records. I've spoken to people from 62 different countries across 22 different categories. And we get about 150,000 views and listens every single day. And the numbers are growing. So that's how this whole thing started. And now it seems to have acquired a life of its own. People are writing to me from all over. I normally have about 6 to 7 weeks booking completely filled. So for example, I'm now taking bookings for the end of June and early July. So that's how it started. And it's just become a very powerful platform, or what I call a digital public library for knowledge, experience, and wisdom. That's a quick background. Long-winded, but I thought I'd give you the whole thing.
Yeah, I want the whole story. And, I've been fortunate enough to be part of your 2.5 and FOCA on 2 occasions now. So it's great to be able to give you the honour back of having a chat with you this time.
Thank you for speaking to me. Yeah.
But I'm not sure how many people asked you if you'd be interviewed. That's why I thought, I'm going to ask Ashutosh, and you thankfully said yes. Has there been a pattern that just stands out? 62 countries, 2,500 folk being interviewed, 22 different topics and subjects that you're interviewing within or categories. Has there been a pattern of any sort of patterns that just really jump out for you about the book within people that your conversations are allowing to come out?
So, I would say patterns have evolved based on a lot of viewer feedback we get. Now, another piece of data for you is that 74% of my viewers and listeners are under 34 years of age. 62% in India, 29% in the US, 2 or 3% in the UK, and the balance spread all over the world. So I think what is happening is, and I'm a little conscious about 2 or 3 different things when I'm selecting my guest, so that I don't have too much of the same pattern, if I can use that term. So I have people in geopolitics. If I've had too many people in geopolitics, I'll be maybe talking to industrialists or senior corporate leaders, startup entrepreneurs, human resource leaders, authors like yourself, business coaches, and so on. And that is one thing that I'm conscious about, to have a little bit of a balance. The second thing I'm very conscious about is gender balance. I want to make sure that I have at least a 50-50 male-female mix. And I think we are there.
Yeah, then these are important issues to be aware of, obviously, when you're doing what you're doing through the brand called you. And one of your other roles is as a CEO coach. And what are some of the key factors that you're finding are topical in that space of your current work, Ashutosh?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but are you asking me the question that what do I talk about to CEOs?
Yes, are there some patterns there, or the issues are very, very specific to that CEO, or there's some patterns?
All my conversations are customized for every single interview. I'm very conscious of that.
Sure.
What I have seen very often when I'm talking to extremely senior corporate leaders, or for example, had a conversation with the person who's called the father of modern branding, a guy called David Acker. And he's been called father of modern branding by Peter Drucker. Now, I know that because of my gray hair and all my background and experience, I was able to get access to him. But he was a person who a lot of young people may not be able to get access to. So I do talk about a lot of questions that I believe young people may want to hear on branding, marketing, advertising, etc. I have a series of conversations I've done with supply chain leaders. Now, supply chains stakes are very big. I've done amazing conversations with artificial intelligence leaders. So, for example, I spoke to the head of United Nations for artificial intelligence. Now, these are people who I have known, and therefore they speak to me. I was fortunate enough to have served for 8 years on the board of Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization in Geneva. So I have a series of interviews on the COVID vaccine, on health and wellness, and people from the Gates Foundation, etc., have all spoken to me. So there is a pattern that I'm trying really to draw as much knowledge, experience, and wisdom from each of my guests that I think a lot of my viewers and listeners will want to hear. I would say 95% of the comments we get are very, very laudatory. We do get some brickbats saying, you shouldn't have spoken to this person or something. But generally, I think within each category, people do appreciate the amount of work that is going in for the conversation.
Yes, and look, when you've got publicly available social media access to the work you're doing, you're always going to get a small percentage of people that aren't going to be happy with doing, and that's actually a sign of success in the modern world.
Correct.
Behind everything you've explained there, the people that you've been able to interview, literally on behalf of that under 34-year-old age group that you mentioned with equal gender balance there, Ashutosh, if you hadn't have spent a lifetime building your network, you wouldn't have access to these people.
No, never.
How was it that you learned of the importance of networks?
So I'm going to be 68 this year, and I think I've been fortunate to have met and spoken to hundreds and thousands of people around the world. I've also been fortunate to have been sat on global boards. I was recognized by the World Economic Forum as what they presumptuously used to call in those days global leaders for tomorrow. Now they call them young global leaders. So I think I've always believed that there is so much to learn from every single individual. So I make it a point to go and talk to people. I make it a point to reach out to younger people. I mentor a lot of young people. They come and the only condition I say is that you have to come and meet me and at a time and place that is convenient to me. I do enter. So I think work is absolutely critical. And I must mention networking is not more likes on a social media page. I mean, people have thousands of likes, but can they call anyone friend? I'm not sure. So I think it's very important to be able to network. And you have to give a lot of yourself in any kind of a relationship that you want to build before you are able to expect something in return. You know, it's an old or an Indian saying, which is that you do good and then put your expectations into the well. Don't expect anything. Even from the Gita, it is said that your job is to do your work and not to expect anything in return for your work.
Yes.
So the same thing goes in all relationships, networking. Do give what you can, and if you get something in return, be grateful for it.
Be grateful for it. And so your mind and attitude towards the networking that you've done, am I hearing, Ashutosh, that you were literally born with that inside you, and that may have been a way, even as a little child, people may have observed you connecting with other people and engaging with them, and that's just a behavior you continued, and then one day at some point in your life someone labeled it networking, you went, oh, that's I already do that. Is that somewhat accurate? Yeah.
Yes. I've always enjoyed meeting people, talking to people, talking at meetings, going out. And having said that, as you start getting older, like I am at my age, I sometimes do think that, do I really want to go out and make new friends? And that's a debate I do keep having internally.
Yes. I can relate to that with 5 children. The first, as you have your first child, and we were in our early 30s when we had our first child, and I remember speaking with my wife when they started going to school and stuff. We might make some new friends. I don't know if we've got room for any more new close friends. But sure enough, we did. And with each of the 5 children that came along, we've made lifelong friends. Somehow you do. It's amazing. Look at that. Now, that's a nice segue to your new book.
Yeah.
And the 7 Chakras of Management, Ancient Wisdom from Indic Scriptures. Now, I have purchased the book and I have work my way into the second chapter, and it's fascinating. From a non-Indian, non-Hindu background, I feel like I'm learning so much, but it seems so much like it just made sense. Can you tell us about your motivation to write this current book?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked me this question, because out of all my 9 books, I think writing the 7 Chakras of Management took me the longest. To write this, and also needed a lot of research. You know, I've always been educated at home when I was a child by my mother on the Hindu script, and therefore I was always aware that I needed to learn more. But as one gets caught up with careers and so on, didn't really give much time. When the pandemic started, someone sent me a link from the Harvard Divinity School on a program being done online on Hinduism. And I said, let me register for it. It was very cheap. Pandemic, everything was very cheap. And as I started to explore, I found that it was a 7-module program, which were on the 7 major religions of the world: Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism. The last 4 are from India, have grown from India. And that's why they all 4 are referred to as Indic, coming out of India.
Yes.
As I did my program, as I passed my examinations and whatever else, I started to say that there is so much knowledge in not just the Indic scriptures, but in all the 7 religions that I spoke about. And there's not much difference in all these religions. It's just a question of how we interpret knowledge that is sitting in each of these, scriptures.
Yes.
As I started to explore, I said that the corporate world is a world that I've known the best. What lessons can I draw? So I said that there are little traditions of anger management, for example. Now, we all face anger management issues in the corporate world. We've all been through it ourselves. Or gratitude, or something to do with why am I not getting promoted when someone else is getting promoted? Or diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, these are all topics that are very current. So I wrote down all of them and I said, just like there are 7 nerve points in our body, which are really the head, the forehead, the neck, the heart, all 7 are there. And each of these nerve points have the ability to control a part of our lives and address a part of our lives. I said, if I take the same 7 nerve points and transfer them into an organization, there will be these nerve points which are at the head, which are on top, the crown of the head, the forehead, and so on and so forth. That's how the whole book started. And it was just an amazing journey to have been able to relate each of these 28, 29 areas that I. So I'll give you an interesting example of, say, diversity, equity.
Yes, please.
Which in the last 8-10 years, the whole world is talking about,
Yes.
especially after the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Everyone's talking of DEI. And I have been speaking at conferences and said that but in India, we've had DEI for thousands of years. And one interesting example is that if you look at the 7-star constellation up in the sky, which the Western world refers to as the Great Bear or the Big Dipper, in India, we refer to them as the 7 holy men or the Saptarishis. I said in those 7 stars, there is a twin star constellation, which is in our scriptures is written as one of the main rishis and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that we've always had that the wife or the female the spiritual leader as a part of these 7 stars. But the more important thing is that these stars, unlike other constellations or other planets, etc., these two revolve around each other. Rather than if you look at our Earth and Moon, the Moon revolves around the Earth, right? These two revolve around each other. So even today in Indian marriages, after the marriage has been completed, the priest takes the person out, the couple out, and points to the sky and say, "Be like that twin star. You are both equal. You will revolve around each other, and nobody can say that I am more dominant than you are." So I'm just giving us an interesting twist of story to how we have drawn examples from the scriptures into my book. So there are many, many, many such examples that I could keep giving you, but let me just start with this one.
Because your 7 chakras all do relate to a part of the body. I noticed as I was going through identifying them.
So I'll just read it out to you.
Yeah.
One is the root chakra, which is at the bottom of your body. The second one is where your reproductive organs are, which is called the sacral chakra. The third is the solar plexus, which you will understand. The fourth is the heart. The fifth is the throat. The sixth is the third eye. We've all been in Hinduism, we believe that there's a third eye, which gives you the ability to see much more than what 2 eyes can. And the 7th one is the crown. So I have in each of these, the crown, for example, will be top management. So each of these have been related to the organization, and each of those also has subheadings which say that how do you address what are there in your daily life and how can you address these.
Yes. And the term chakra
is a wheel.
A wheel.
Yoga is very, very popular in Australia and many of your listeners. Anyone who does yoga or meditation will immediately understand what a chakra is. Chakra is a word, WHORL, or a wheel or a point.
Beautiful. Because Not everyone in my audience will know that. So we've just intent is to educate them, and that's why the seven chakras of management are equally like the twin stars. They all there's no dominant one. They rotate around each other.
That's one. And second is that they also correlate with the seven nodes of our body.
Yes.
So an organization also has the same seven chakras or seven wheels, the seven nerve points that we can all relate with.
Yes. Again, I haven't finished the book, so I haven't gone through all your examples. But is there and because I know through your youth and the power of storytelling and how much you believe in storytelling, that's one of the beautiful things with our religions and the scriptures is they are stories, and they were written for largely an illiterate population, and so the narrative and the story was how people learned everything and made sense of their world. Is without giving too much away from your book, because we want to encourage people to go and get it. Is there like a management story out of one of the chapters that you're finding people are really helping them to understand that connection?
Difficult for me to pick up any specific stories because there are so many of them. But I'll give you one interesting story that, when I was 35 or 36, I was called by the chairman of my company and told that, I think it's time for you to go to Singapore. So I said, to do what? He said, I don't know. So I said, you're sending me to Singapore, which was the first time we're going to set up a full office there. You have to give me a mandate. So he looked at me, he smiled, and this is chairman of a multi-billion-dollar company. He smiled at me, took out his letter pad, and signed at the bottom and said, go and write your own mandate. Right now, for a 35, 36-year-old, it was frightening, and yet it was a great opportunity. We went and built a huge $250 million company. And we're growing that. What were the lessons? The lessons really came from the Gita. The Gita is a very important 700-verse poem, which is a part of two of the major major books of India. One is Ramayana and the other is Mahabharata. And this was recited by God, one who was in battle, Lord Krishna to Arjun. The example that I gave you was really something that I had learned from my mother, which is that if you are asked to do something, don't keep thinking, what do I get in return? You go out, take the task that you have asked to do, so in whatever best way you can. Don't ask for rewards, because rewards will follow, and they will come to you without asking when the time is right. So there are many such examples that I have in my book.
And there's an element of karma in that. And I do wonder, Ashutosh, our Western world has at times a misunderstanding or an oversimplification of karma. And I know you talk about karma in your book.
So karma is really, it's misinterpreted. It is used in different ways, but karma is really what you are going to do. Some people use the word karma as what your fate may be, right? So if it's your karma, you will not deliver, you won't get what you want. But karma is really, from my perspective, something that is your duty that you are doing, and you're doing this duty without any expectations of anything in return.
And you talk about duty in relation to your work. Because it is a corporate book.
No, not only that, Gary. I think our karma is also something which is to our family.
Yes.
It is toward our relationships, for our friends, to ourselves,
Yes.
So it's much more than just the corporate world.
Yeah, yes, of course. And I did understand that. I guess what I was trying to go there is that the message I'm taking from there is go to work and do a good job. It's your duty to do a good job. It's your duty to understand what that means. Yeah. Now, even if that's a blank sheet to go to score and make it work, and that's your mandate. It's an open book. In other words, your duty is to figure that out for yourself and go and make it happen. And I'm sensing that globally we've got data, Ashutosh, it's telling us that nearly 8 out of every 10 people are disengaged with their workplace. And in a lot of places, people are trying to, how can I get paid as much as I possibly can for maybe not doing as much?
Correct.
That would be the opposite to doing your duty.
Absolutely. So if you look at it a little more deeply, most of us tend to be very transactional in our relationships and in our action. If I'm talking to Gary, what am I getting in return? If I'm going to do something for someone else, is there a quid pro quo involved?
Mm.
If I'm going to be asked to give 1 hour of my time, it's going to be worth so much. Right? So we're very, very transactional in everything that we want to do. Now, that is something which I have said is not really a driver or should not be a driver for any of us. As long as I have sufficient faith in first myself, in the relationship that I have with the person I'm doing something for, I don't think the relation should be premised on what am I going to get out of it. And more often than not, I've been rewarded far more than what I could have ever hoped for.
Part of the answer there, Ashutosh, is first myself, which suggests to me that you're an advocate for you must do the work on yourself, to have faith in yourself. In order to be able to do your duty for others, whether that be at work or in relationships or whatever, you need to have done the work on yourself so that you're got the internal discipline and motion, I guess, to be able to genuinely go into a relationship with another and give without any expectation of anything in return, including specifically to the workplace. I'm going to go and do the best job I can, no matter what. Yeah.
There is another very interesting aspect, and I've quoted this from my father, who was a very highly decorated soldier, a brigadier general in the Indian Army.
Yes.
And he always told me, and this is not just about work, but he said about each one of us, and this is a life lesson. Every morning when I'm standing in front of the mirror, shaving, he used to say that if you can look at yourself in the eye and say to yourself, yesterday I did not knowingly do anything wrong, and I did not knowingly harm anybody, that's the only justification you ever need in your life. Right? Now, it's the same thing that will apply to work. If you can look at yourself in the eye and say, I did my work yesterday to the best of my capability, that's all that you need to be worried about.
So I'm 5 years shared that you're coming up to 68 and your audience is 34 or younger. So if they were to say, oh, you two old fellas, that's ancient stuff, do your duty at work. That's for your generation. What would you say to the younger folk that might say that about this topic?
So my only thing to them is that, there is nothing called old or young at 68. I'm chronologically old, but knowledge can never get old, right? Wisdom can never get old. Experience can never get old. So I think what is important is, and it's entirely up to people listening to us to say, is there a takeaway from this or is there not a takeaway? And if there is a takeaway, then it's worthwhile also listening to and saying that what are the 2 or 3 interest points that I can get from someone who's older? And, that I'm 68 or you're 55, all the young people have elders in their families. And I do believe that most young people have a lot of respect for elders in families. So that is one part. But the other part is that whether you're reading any religious scripture, most of them are a few thousand years old. And it's not as if those few thousand-year-old scriptures have disappeared from the lives of young people. There is still an understanding and will continue to for all times to come, because these are little crutches that each one of us has to say there is a being who's much more powerful than us, which is God. And this is only for the believers. For non-believers, whatever you believe in is fine. So I think it's not a question of what we are saying. It's a question of, does it appeal to your basic senses? And if it does, I'm sure there is a lot to take away from it.
Yes. So again, with that data of unfortunately how many people are reporting that they're disengaged with work, and some of them potentially justifiably so say, well, I get treated just as a number. So if I get treated just as a number and I go and I fulfill my duty and I give all of myself in my workplace, why should I do that? Now, I have an answer as to why they should for their own sake, but I'd prefer to hear yours.
So, I don't think there is anybody I have met who doesn't want to do well in life, who doesn't want recognition, who doesn't want success. And each one of us does it differently. Someone sent me a very interesting story of a young, otherwise challenged person who was who was handling a till and in a supermarket. And for the first few weeks, people weren't coming because he may have been slightly slower. Till he came upon an interesting thought for himself. And before you knew it, the store manager realized that there was a long queue to check out only from this young individual. So when he went go to the customers and said, listen, there are 3 other cash tills available. Why don't you go there? They said, no, we'd rather wait for Johnny. Johnny's just a name I've given. When they tried to find out, what he used to do was he would take, at home, he would go write out a quotation, an interesting quotation, and he'd write thousands of them, hundreds of them, keep them, and in every bag of shopping, he would drop one quotation. That is what differentiated him into being a successful person at whatever he was doing. So I think every one of us has a way to be able to differentiate ourselves. And I'd be surprised if someone says that I have no interest in moving ahead in life or doing well in life.
Yes.
And it's not only for money.
Yes. No, it's not. It's definitely not only for money. I mean, it's important. We all know we have an economic reality, but there is
Money is important, but not the only driver.
It's not the only driver.
Yeah.
What would be a last key message you'd like to share with my audience? It's only not quite 33,000 by the time this episode will go to air, compared to your 150,000 per day. But nonetheless, hopefully we're introducing some new folk to you. What would be a last key message that you'd like to share with folk to encourage them possibly to read the Seven Chakras of Management?
Well, I would certainly encourage them to read the book, because there's a lot of knowledge in this book, and you can skim ahead. And if you are really keen on doing, getting into a discussion or have questions, write to me. You can go to my website, The Brand Called You, www.tbcy.in, or my emails on my LinkedIn page. Connect with me there. But I think one comment that I want to be able to say, and I've said this many times to a lot of people, have the ability to say no. Very, very few people have the ability or the courage to say, great opportunity, but I don't think I want to do it. So I've always said, have the courage to say no, because that is what will start differentiating you from a lot of others who will say, let me try and do it. And then they do a half shoddy work or partly, not so good work and so on.
Yes.
So that's what I would leave as a last thought.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Now, you have said yes to many, many things. We've certainly heard about all the organizations that you've been party to.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got a strong example of something that you said no, that maybe you can't reveal the names, but you actually...
When I started my chain of pharmacies, and it was the first store, I was standing there, and there's a lady who walked up, and it was a small store, and she picked up a lot of items and then went to the cash till and said, can you make her a bill? And then she said, can you give me a bill for medicines? Now, the reason for medicines was if it's medicines, then she could claim it as an expense in her income tax. So for the store manager or the staff behind the counter, his eyes could see the dollar bills or the cash register ringing in front of his eyes, because it was the first week or 10 days for the first store of the chain. He looked at me and I shook my head and I said, no. So he said, looked at me again and said, it's a lot of money that we're going to get. So I just said no. So he said, sorry, ma'am, we cannot give you a wrong bill. And got very angry. She walked out. I'm going to get this thing shut down. I'll do this, I'll do that. 1 week later, I was in the store again and she had walked in. And I said, this time I walked up and said, ma'am, I remember what happened last time. I just want to say that we will not be able to give you an incorrect bill. And she said, no, I've not come for you for that. The fact that you're not willing to give an incorrect bill means I can trust you and your shop. And therefore, I will always come to you. It's now 17 years and she's a regular customer. So there is a power in saying no.
Yes, I love that story, and thank you so much for sharing it, because that's everything tied to the whole conversation. This is the way the world works over time, right?
Yeah.
And again, that was about integrity. That's about staying true to your brand.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And folks, I want to encourage you all to go and check out the Brand Called You. 2,500 interviews, 22 different categories of industries for you to check out. As you've heard from Ashutosh himself, we're talking the absolute top people in their fields. He's giving you the access to people that you might not have direct access to. As you've seen and witnessed yourselves today, folks, Ashutosh is extremely giving and generous with his time. As I've said, I've got the digital version of the most recent book, The Seven Chakras of Management. Yes, you show it. Yes, please.
There's the book.
Yes, we'll have links to that as well. And it's available through all versions of Amazon. And is it also through the Brand Called You? They can purchase it directly there as well?
Yeah, all my books are available on Amazon.
Yeah, and on Amazon as well. That's right. Yeah, so I absolutely encourage folks to go and get them, because the knowledge, wisdom, and experience that is in you, Ashutosh. I know you tap into everyone else about that, but you're so generous with it, and I'm so pleased and grateful and honoured that you would join us on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for inviting me. I enjoyed my conversation with you twice about coaching, about your books, Yes for Success, which is your latest book. Thank you again for inviting me, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much. And folks, please continue to watch us and subscribe. Hit the notifications button, and we look forward to you joining us next time on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. Bye.
Bye-bye.